to bring these discussions about China and Nepal relation and how it is impacting the Tibetan refugees in Nepal, and to reflect more on the complex interplay and dynamics of geopolitical factors between two countries, and the whole discussions about refugee protection. We have a very two distinguished speakers who are very well known in the field and the subject that today we are discussing. So we have Professor Vijaykant Karna. He is an executive chairperson of the Center for Social Innovations and Foreign Policy, Nepal. And he had published and edited several books on China and Nepal relations. And he was also Nepal's former ambassador to Denmark. So with his such a rich experience in the foreign policy, and particularly on the China and Nepal relations, we are very looking forward to have an extensive discussions about China-Nepal relations. And then for the next speaker, we have Tinze Dawala, and she's the director of Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy, and located in Dharamshala, where the Central Tibetan Administration is also located. And last year, Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy published a report about the situations of Tibetans refugees in Nepal. And it's I was just talking with Dawala before our discussions, and she told me that the last report was published in 2014. So it's been a long gap that there's no reports and discussions about the Tibetans refugees in Nepal. So we have today we have two very distinct speakers, and then we also have Professor Pan Mele from the same university, our university. Professor Pan has for a long time engaged on research and studies related to Tibetans refugees in Nepal and in India. With her, and she have also visited, and so knowing the place and situation in firsthand, will be able to provide a more nuanced remarks after this discussion. So without taking much time, so yeah, I wanted to just inform our both speakers that each of you have like about 20 to 30 minutes to speak. And this will followed by remarks by our discussants, and then followed by question and answer from audiences, if there's any questions from the audience. Right, so without taking much time, may I invite Professor Vijaykant to first speak about China and Nepal relations.
Thank you, Dolma, for your organizing such a important discussion. And I'm happy to join all of you. I think Tenzin Dawa, I met you in Delhi, I think so. So it's nice to see you all. Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to just a little bit the current status of Nepal's China relations. So China in Nepal is a very big player at the moment in internal politics of Nepal. Very important player because of the Chinese Communist Party relation with the Nepal's Communist Party. And today in Nepal, there is a Communist Party government. Last one year and 3 months, but you can see that in December 2022, when the new government was formed, people say that it was managed by because before that, there was a coalition with the Nepali Congress, which is a democratic party, with the Prachanda, the Maoist party. But China has shifted this coalition and facilitated between two communist party, and the Prachanda shifted to the UML. and the new government was formed in the beginning of 23. But in a month, that has been turned down. Again, Prachanda back to Prachanda, and that Nepali Congress and the UML became in opposition. But recently, in 2 weeks, there is another change in Nepal. Just 2-3 weeks it is. Uh, in the beginning of March, what we found that again China managed both communist party to join together. And now the Nepali Congress is in a government, and Nepali Congress is in a government. Give me 1 minute, please. I have sorry. So they have managed the government. Day after tomorrow, our foreign minister, without any agenda, it is said that it is a, it is a, it is a, uh, it is said that it is a goodwill visit, but this gentleman, who is a foreign minister of Nepal, is visiting third time within a year. So, and he is the deputy chairman person of the Communist Party of Nepal. And he is visiting three important places: Beijing, Lhasa, Choichung, and there is another place, it is called Chengdu. Chengdu. So all these three he is meeting several top leaders. So this is a trend where the Chinese Communist Party and Chinese government trying to influence Nepal's relations through Communist Party. This is the new development almost last, I can say that the 10-15 years of the trend, that where the Chinese Communist Party relation with the Nepal's Communist Party has been getting a very close ties in different sector on the training. So one part is this one. At the moment, what we found that China has been active, the role in Nepal at the moment, in infrastructure, in other different areas. So what I have see that as I said that the China has tried at the election, time of the presidential election, somebody from the Communist Party to be elected. But unfortunately, it was not happen, and the president is from Nepali Congress Party. So the Chinese engagement at the moment, current engagement, in the last few years, a paradigm shift has been witnessed in China-Nepal policy from friendly non-interference neighbor to an influential external party in domestic politics and a major player in geopolitical front. Chinese engagement have been increasing across various sectors, particularly in politics, economy, and public front, including the civil society, media. Chinese engagement also include heightened security and military cooperation, including other forms of strategic engagement. Furthermore, China has been strongly pressurized Nepal to curb any form of anti-Tibetan activities in territory and adherence to one China policy. In this context, I just wanted to mention, in last September, our Prime Minister was in Beijing, and Nepal and China have signed a MOU, joint communique, they released joint communique, where Nepal's and China shifted from one China policy to one China principle. So Nepal agreed on, it is yet not defined what does it mean one China principles, but Nepal agreed on one China principle. This is a paradigm shift in the relation between Nepal and Tibet. Tibet has remained a central concern on Nepal-China bilateral relations. Furthermore, as a signatory party of BRI, which is a flagship program of the China, China has been pressuring Nepal for loans to implement projects under BRI, which is last 1 week it has been discussed in Nepal. If you see the Nepal's today's paper, everywhere you find about the BRI. So it's one of the very important area where the Nepal yet not agreed with the Chinese conditions. While Nepal has been insisting on grants and China has proposed loan, so which has put implementation of BRI in limbo. Meanwhile, China has also increased its presence in Nepal through Chinese NGOs, especially after 2015 earthquake. However, the working modalities and their strategic interest for the presence in Nepal is little known. It is not properly transparent as the Western NGOs, other countries' NGOs is working in Nepal. India does not have any NGO in Nepal. But the other Western countries, there are a lot. They're funding Nepalese NGO also. Chinese NGO, how they are functioning, how they are funding, it is yet not known to the public. So coming to the point, comprehensive friendship to a strategic partnership. In 2019, when President Xi visited Nepal, we agreed for the China has upgraded Nepal's relations from comprehensive partnership to the strategic partnership. What does it mean? Nobody knows. Nepal never said China as a strategic partnership, but China is always says a strategic partnership. President Xi visit to Nepal in October 2019 signaled important development in Nepal-China relations. Both countries agreed to shift bilateral relationship from comprehensive friendship to a strategic partnership. However, the mention of the term is still ambiguous. 3 years after the announcements, the components of a strategic partnership, as outlined in the joint statement by the President Xi and Nepal presidents, are a strategic security cooperation, a strategic security communication, broadening practical cooperation, expanding people's to people's ties, and enhancing security cooperation. This indicates China's shift of the policy from friendship-based to the bilateral cooperation to extension of Chinese strategic interest in Nepal's politics, governance, foreign policy, security, and economic development. Second, Buddhism as a Chinese foreign policy tool in Nepal. China has invoked Buddhism as its tool to resolve its security crisis in Tibet by renewing its policy include religion to enhance social capital. Furthermore, Buddhism diplomacy is the forefront of China's engagement across the Himalayan region, including South Asia and Southeast Asia. Lumbini, which holds significance as the birthplace of Lord Buddha, is strategically significant for China. In 2011, the Asia Pacific Exchange and Cooperation Foundation, Vice President Xiao, it's one of the China's big NGO, signed a signatory ceremony with the United Nations Industrial Development Organization for 3 billion to bring all practices of Buddhism together with massive investment allocated for the development of the Lumbini, which was opposed by the other political parties and it was cancelled at the moment. No. The proposed Trans-Himalayan Railway, there is another big message is the Trans-Himalayan Railway from Kering to Kathmandu. So the proposed Trans-Himalayan Railway network is envisioned to link Lhasa, Sigatse to Kerung and later Kathmandu and eventually to Lumbini. The proposed is from Lhasa to Sigatse, Sigatse to Kerung, Kerung to Kathmandu and Kathmandu to Lumbini. That is the plan. Chinese contractors were involved in the construction of Gautam Buddha International Airport. China has also invested in Buddhist University in Lumbini. Apart from connectivity, China has extended its assistance in construction of heritage sites and local development. Furthermore, heritage revival and Buddhism is included as an integral part of BRI MOU. China's strategic interest in Lumbini is multifold. First, China is pursuing Buddhism as a soft power tool to exert its influence. Second, through co-opting Buddhism in Nepal and South Asia. China wants to dilute the security threat from the Tibetan community in Nepal and India. Third, with the realization that no gain in the legitimacy over the succession of Dalai Lama, control over the Buddhism, and co-opting various sects of Buddhism is fundamental, for which a strong hold over Lumbini may be a symbol of dominance. Fourth, as Lumbini does not only hold a strategic importance but also geostrategic significance, with increasing engagement of India in Lumbini, China's strong presence would aid its dream of rising as a sole hegemon in the region. Actually, while I was telling about the Lumbini is significant, most important. There are, in 2019, when I was there, I found that almost more than 100, 120, 102, 122 people are where they are from the China. Now it is less than due to COVID, it was not that much, but later. There are two monasteries built by Chinese, and Chinese every year organize 3-4 programs. China, the New Year, many programs. Even the Lord Buddha birthday, many things they do in Lumbini. The third is the Dalai Lama successor and geopolitics in Nepal. With the current Dalai Lama already on his mid-90s, the 80s, the appointment of his successor and legitimacy of newly appointed religious leader remain an important dimension of Nepal-China bilateral relations. Recently, China's Tibet party secretary was in Kathmandu. Just 3-4 months back, he was in Kathmandu. 3 months back, he was in Kathmandu. He met several leaders. From Nepal, he went to Sri Lanka. Then he went to Myanmar and Thailand. So his mission was to actually get the support of the at the demise of the Dalai Lama, the successor of the Dalai Lama, 14th Dalai Lama, to get whatever the China decide. So he has been meeting Nepal's Communist Party leaders or different political party leaders and discussing on it. So with this, Chinese authority official stand to reject any succession from the outside its territory and among those in exiles. There seems possibility of appointment of 2 leaders by the Chinese authority and Dharamsala in parallel. With a large community of Tibetans in exile in Nepal and their connection with Dharamsala, headquarters of Tibetan in exile, China seeks Nepal legitimacy on the next spiritual leader appointed by the Chinese authority and son the one appointed by the central Tibetan authority. In the meantime, to guard the situation regarding the potential agitation of Tibetan exile population in Nepal, China strongly pressurized Nepal to adhere to the One China policy. In this regard, Chinese embassy has been a very good relations, trying to keep relations with the security agencies. And then coming to the BRI. China seems eager to portray the to BRI success in Nepal, but the China-Nepal BRI agreement signed in 2017 has remained in limbo. In December 2022, China sent an expert team to initiate the feasibility study of Kathmandu-Kerung Railway, a project under BRI. There have been a few other developments over the years, but neither has a project undergone the construction phase nor have any provision has been implemented. There are 2-3 things related to BRI in Nepal. Our government categorically told Chinese that we are not ready to take loan, commercial loan. So either you give us grants or give us soft loan like World Bank and ADB, number one. Number two, recently our former Prime Minister said in Parliament that Chinese wanted to build the BRI project. Chinese money, Chinese companies, Chinese labor, Chinese construction That is not acceptable to us. So that is why we wanted to joint management, soft loan, and then international bidding process, which we do with the other countries. So this is the one of the biggest. In 2022, in the beginning, when we ratified the America's MCC project by the parliament, the Chinese foreign minister was in Kathmandu, and the then prime minister told Wang Yi that we will not ready to take loan from China. We wanted grants, not the loan. So, but this is the situation. Yet not any project has been signed. We have selected 9 projects under BRI. 2 projects has been taken out from the BRI 9 projects. So that's why what we found that the BRI, the recent, the day after tomorrow, our foreign minister visiting China. So I don't know what happened there, whether he signed the BRI agreement or not. But the question remains that if he signed, there will be a protest in parliament, other opposition party will not agree on that. So this, because of we are not ready to take commercial loan from any countries. One very good thing in Nepal that Nepal has never taken commercial loan. This is very important. So that's why it's a very important that the BRI project implementation is a big challenge. So there are also not feasible development in BRI implementation near future. Nepal has been insisting on grants while China has been stressing on loan for fund the BRI project. The maximum interest rate for soft loan that multilateral donors offered us like World Bank, ECM, ADB provide us 1.3%. And with a more extended repayment period around 30 to 35 years. Under BRI, that is 12 to 15 years. So this is even not suitable for Nepal. So this is still not any project has been implemented in Nepal. BRI is still in limbo. Now coming to the 5th point, the relation with the political parties. Actually, this is the most important thing. The Chinese diplomacy now it's turned to the political party first and then to the government. So this is a very important part that of the Chinese Communist Party. So last few years, almost 10-15 years, China has been trying to teach, to train Nepal communist leaders from ideological training, from party to government relationship training, and different way of. So it's a large number of communist party leaders are visiting China for training, from top to bottom. So even in the last year, 16 delegation from Nepal in 23. So this is so it's a ideal. And in 2019 September, Nepal Communist Party and China Communist Party has signed MOU by which they agree for training, ideological training, organizational training, and governance training, and the close relation tie-up between the two communist parties. So it's a very important in this engagement. So now large scale of cadres, large scale of political leaders of communist parties are visiting China for training since 7-8 years, not the new phenomena. It's after 2015-16 it has started, and this is still it is continued. So China's strategy to Nepal is Communist Party relation built with the Communist Party and then to the government. So any project, any policy coming from China is coming through the Communist Party leaders. So this is a new development in Nepalese context. Now coming to the 6th point I mentioned here, China state enterprise and contractor as vanguard of Chinese interest in Nepal. Large number of our infrastructure project in communication, in road, in hydropower, in drinking water, almost 90-95% of the projects, big projects, are in the hand of Chinese company. They make lowest bidding and they go for it. But at the end of the project, they took much more money than the project amount. They managed to bribe the government official, bureaucracy, technical manpower, consultant, and they do like that. But no project at the moment, many of the projects are not completed on time, and that's why they have been criticized. Now, another concern, security cooperation and strategic engagement. China views deepening military and security cooperation with Nepal as a strategy to dilute Nepal's historical dependence with India and USA. Furthermore, China emphasizes Nepal on embarking independent diplomacy and taking independent decisions and matters of international and domestic affairs. This security and stability of Tibet is often viewed in line with the security of Chinese border and curbing anti-Chinese activities supported by the external forces in Nepal. And it is targeted against Tibetan refugee and Tibetan uprising, Tibetan people. So the stability of Tibet is often viewed in the line with the security of the Chinese border and curbing anti-Chinese activities supported by external forces in Nepal. In 2019, Nepal and China signed military cooperation agreement with the 2.5 billion Nepali rupees. Early in 2018, China promised lethal military aid of 2.53 billion to Nepal. It's Nepali rupees all. The enhanced military assistance from China in the recent decades has further fueled the geopolitical strengths in the country. And Nepal and Chinese army has started joint military exercises. It's the recent one from the 18 it is started. So this is a new phenomenon. And Chinese defense minister in 2021, who was sacked at the moment, I have heard, he was General Feng Fei something, his name was. So he visited Nepal for one-day visit. He has spent 6 hours at the military headquarters of Nepal Army. So now another one, trade transit and blockade in Chinese border. Since January 2020, the Nepal-China border has remained closed till 23. Almost in mid of the 23, several borders opened, but not fully opened, yet not fully opened. And one of the border, Tatopani, which has been considered to be a very important border in Nepal, which is called in Tibet Khasa, and Nepalese side it is called Tatopani. So that border is yet not properly opened. So it has created a big problem for the people living in the border. So many of the border where the people living in the both sides are Tibetan origin. They have a religious relations, they have a cultural relations, family relations. But now since 10, 15 years, what we found that it has been almost trying to close it. There should be no border. Just a little bit, I will tell you just a minute. Actually, there are 2-3 things in your topics when we are talking about the Nepal-China relations and Tibetan refugee in Nepal. My observation are that China since 2005 has been managed. China managed this with the king, From 1995 to till date, there are, as my information, around 6,000 to 7,000 Tibetan refugees who yet not get ID card. It is not because that the Nepal government don't want to give it. It is because of the Chinese government pressurized Nepal's constitutive government not to give us. In 2005, Nepal government of the king's government has actually banned and asked the CTA office to be closed, and they removed their signboard from the central place of the Kathmandu. So when we comes to the Tibet, Nepal shares border with the Tibetan Autonomous Region, and the northern region of Nepal has a people of Tibetan origin. As in the beginning, there were 25,000 Tibetan refugees residing in Nepal, but now I have heard that it is around 10 to 12,000. And many of them are yet not get their ID card. So therefore, China fears that the Free Tibet supporter and sympathizer, which was actually visible during the 2009 at the 50th anniversary of His Holiness exit from Lhasa, and even sometimes during the Olympic game, there was a huge protest in Kathmandu, and one person was trying emulate. So, so it's a look. What I found that this they are very conscious about it, because there are two events which is happened here. In 1999, Karmappa Ugen Trinley Dorji, recognized by the Dalai Lama and the Chinese government, is kept via Mustang. So Mustang is a very important place. And from Mustang it is Jomsom, and Jomsom to Pokhara, which is very important for, the China as well as from Tibetan people. There is a large number of Tibetan refugees in Pokhara. So Chinese always try to build a very strategic relations in the Pokhara. So that's why they have insisted to build China Pokhara. That the Chinese helped to build a Pokhara airport. So it's a look. So this is one of the, and coming to the human rights, what I have gone through the report which you were mentioned earlier. Look, in Nepal you can protest peacefully. This is in the fundamental rights of the country. You are allowed to protest, but China it is not. Look, what happened, why it is all happening? Because during the earthquake, Chinese risk team found out picture, manuscript, teaching of Dalai Lama inside houses of the border residents in both sides, in Tibet as well as in Nepal. So they have been actually, they shifted many of the villages. Like Khasa, there is no village at the moment. They have been shifted 100 kilometers away. That is what I have never been, but I have told by the people. So local residing in the both sides of the people are suffered a lot. They lost their source of income and they migrated to other places. Their cultural practices, their social relations, their religious relation has been blocked completely. Even there were a large number of marriage earlier before 2015, but now it is not. And another very important thing that I would like to mention, in 2021, October, I think so, Chinese People's Congress passed a bill for the building a uh, township in the border of different borders of the China. So China has started to building town in different location of the Nepal's border. And I've seen in the Humla and the other areas. And that population is not Tibetan population. That is the Han population. So it is expected that they will be resettled in the Nepal's northern border. So, it's a kind of a I mean that the culturally, and they try to cut off the all relations between the two communities. Actually, the one community is in residing in two political geography. They are trying to. When I talk to the many of the people living in different northern border, there is a one very dangerous due to this region. There is a dangerous trend that people are migrating to Kathmandu and other places. People living there, I mean that their original place, they are migrating. Large migration is being done. So people coming to Nepal's Kathmandu, Pokhara, different places of Nepal, they are living because the relations, their economic, cultural, and social relation was cut off. Some of people were very dependent on the doing business with the Khasa, business with the Tibet, but now there is no business. So people for livelihood, for their and they are migrating from. So in few years of time, what we found that there will be desert. Villages were empty, will be empty, and no, you couldn't find it. Any, I mean, the Tibetan people in the northern border of Nepal. There will be large section of people are migrating from Manang, from Mustang, from Dolpa, from Humla, from what is called Solu, from Tapleju. All these are the districts. I met several political leaders in Kathmandu, and they said that there was earlier a link between both sides, but now there is no link, and that's why people are migrating in other areas of Nepal. So it's a kind of a something. I compare it like a Israeli population in Gaza and West Bank, and the people of Palestinian are have to live it. Look, and the major vehicles of the Nepal's, all these happened because of the Communist Party of Nepal. And other challenges living there, I mean the Tibetan refugee in Nepal is that there are two, three things I found it is lacking. Number one, there is a lack of support by the international community in a coherent way. I mean, integrated approach between Americans, Europeans, and other countries. There is a need of a comprehensive policy to supporting Tibetan people in Nepal and even the Tibetan origin people in Nepal. Not I'm talking about the people from Tibet only. So it's a needy a strategic plan by all international community pressurizing Nepal government for their fundamental rights. So these are the basic challenge. And now another very one important thing that the China has managed Nepal's media. A big influence. If you go through our one of the report is in our website, you find that the how the Chinese government, Chinese embassy, Chinese even the Tibet governments are influencing the Nepalese media, mainstream and other media, online and all. So this is very important areas where they have been managing politics, media, economy, civil society in that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sosa. Thank you for bringing such a big topic within a short time and covering not just the Nepal and China relation, but also highlighting some of the important points about Tibetan refugee as well as Tibetan at the border area who are also who are citizen of Nepal.
Yes.
So interesting. So thank you so much. And now may I invite Dawala? So Dawala will speak about Tibetan refugees in Nepal. So Dawala.
Okay. Thank you to Domala and as well as to Professor Vijay Ji for that very comprehensive, understanding, provided that very comprehensive understanding of how Nepal has grown more closer to the Chinese government in recent years. And I think my presentation will sort of very well sit with the kind of issues that the Tibetans living in Nepal have been dealing with in that sort of situation when two of these big, governments get more close. And also how Tibetans living in Nepal has been bearing the brunt of this closing of this relationship, right? So again, I want to thank everyone for organizing this important event and discussion, and also for the organizers and everyone associated for putting this together and making me a part of this discussion. So I represent, before I begin my presentation, I'd just like to briefly introduce the center I work with, if any of you are not familiar with. So I work for the Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy, and we are a Tibetan human rights NGO founded in 1996 in exile in India, where the Dalai Lama is based and where also the Tibetan government in exile functions. And at TCHRD, we are committed to advancing the human rights and democracy of Tibetans, both inside Tibet as well as in the exiled Tibetan community. And a lot of our work has been done on monitoring and documenting and campaigning against human rights abuses, and also by empowering Tibetan advocates. That includes young Tibetans who are, enrolled in different universities in India. So TCHRD, we publish human rights reports and testimonies of political prisoners inside Tibet that eventually sort of, lets us to carrying out evidence-based campaigns to sort of make it, to hold Chinese authorities accountable, right? So I've joined this discussion today to highlight the situation, the human rights situation of Tibetans in Nepal, because my organization, we released a report quite recently in December 2023, and that report is titled as Tibetan refugees living in Nepal who are, languishing in limbo, basically. And that report is a result of a 2-week field visit that me and alongside a former staff of our office. So we had the opportunity to conduct a 2-week visit to Nepal, and had the opportunity to engage with many stakeholders living in Nepal. That includes both Tibetans as well as Nepalese as well, working in different organizations, and also Tibetan settlement officers, Tibetan youth more specifically, and elected representatives as well. So before I begin with the presentation, I'd like to first sort of give a very brief background information on to why Nepal is an important, location or a country for the Tibetans, Tibetan community in general. And so Tibet, as you all know, was occupied by the Chinese government in 1959, and after the 1959 uprising, thousands of Tibetans had to escape into exile, right, following the Dalai Lama. And because Nepal is, is a location, is a country where, is a country that's completely landlocked between Tibet and India. And that's why, many Tibetans, when fleeing to exile into India, many Tibetans also decided to stay back and seek refuge there. And at the time, when the Tibetans were fleeing Nepal, fleeing Tibet, the Nepalese government provided asylum to all Tibetans, seeking refuge there, and also issued refugee cards to them to get access to basic amenities like, in a new country, to including food, shelter, and livelihood, right? And then today there are about 11 Tibetan refugee settlements scattered across both Kathmandu city as well as in Pokhara. And the population of Tibetan refugees in Nepal used to be around 25,000, like Professor Vijay mentioned. But today we're talking about 13,000 Tibetan refugees. Actually, less than 13,000, right? And the number of Tibetan refugees living in Nepal has reduced so much, and also their living conditions have also worsened so much in the last few years. And today, almost 75% of this total population are undocumented, meaning they are all stateless, living in Nepal. So from a legal standpoint, Nepal, although has not signed the 1951 Refugee Convention, but they have been providing assistance to Tibetan refugees only on humanitarian grounds. And aside from the convention not being signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention, Nepal has signed an informal gentleman's agreement with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So that basically provides an informal agreement between the Nepal government and the UNHCR to allow safe transit of Tibetan refugees fleeing Tibet through Nepal to a third country. So that was the informal agreement that was done in 1989 with the UNHCR and the Nepalese government. But through our research, it was quite evident that the terms in these agreements assigned between the UNHCR and the Nepal government has been violated numerous times. So Nepal government, although they have issued refugee cards for Tibetans fleeing Tibet in the early 1960s, but then in the 1990s, Nepal government stopped issuing refugee cards to Tibetans in the 1990s, including in 1995. And because of that, and also some other factors, due to other factors, Tibetans living in Nepal today, they call Nepal as the second Tibet in terms of, the worsening of human rights situation inside Nepal. So we all know how bad the human rights situation of Tibetans in Tibet is under Chinese government occupation. There's always a series of human rights violations taking place, including the freedom of expression, freedom of association, movement, peaceful assembly. All of these are being, violated on a regular basis. But today, Tibetans in Nepal even call Nepal as the second Tibet. So this is, I think, largely due to Nepal's becoming closer to the Chinese government, particularly, when the border crisis that started with India. So in 2015, when Nepal was recovering from a very devastating earthquake and was in need of humanitarian aid at the time. And at the time, the border between India and Nepal used to be open, and we used to get aids, petrol, food, access, and medical supplies. They were all, since the border was open, it was able to access easily. But when India decided to close the border in 2015 due to other reasons, that's when China stepped in, and that's when Nepal and China, I think, became more close, and China started supplying these aids when Nepal was in need, and that's when China. A year later, China signed a series of agreements with Nepal, including a treaty on mutual legal assistance in criminal matters, or they call it the MLAT, and also a boundary management system between Nepal and China, which essentially sort of is being misused to deport Chinese nationals, including Tibetans, back to China who are found or crossing the border illegally into Nepal. So in the following years, China and Nepal trade relations increased, and Nepal also faced greater interference in their own domestic affairs. Like Professor Vijay mentioned, China is a big player in internal politics of Nepal. Um, and yeah, so one of the key foundations in China-Nepal relations is obviously the One China policy, which essentially means that Nepal is committed to the policy and thereby, bans actions against Chinese interests in Nepal. And that means, the Tibetans living in Nepal, who China calls as, the separatist entities or the followers of the Dalai clique, they are being closely watched under this attempt to not anger China by Nepal, right? So under this policy, Nepal obviously does not recognize Taiwan as an independent country and supports Hong Kong's new national security law, the draconian new law that was passed in 2019. So under the One China policy, Nepal authorities have prevented Tibetan refugees from exercising their rights to freedom of expression, freedom from arbitrary detention, and freedom of movement, freedom of religion and belief, and freedom of assembly and association. And because of the close-knit relationship between China and Nepal, Tibetan refugees obviously are facing a string of human rights violations today. So today, the total number of refugees that I mentioned is about 12,500 to 13,000. And among those, almost 75% of the Tibetan refugee population in Nepal are stateless, and they do not have refugee cards. And so when you do not have a refugee card, you cannot basically pursue higher education and work officially there, especially in government jobs and stable jobs. Basically, you cannot get them, and you cannot own or driving license, and cannot even own a business or even or more basic thing, you cannot even open a bank account. So many of the Tibetan stateless do not have bank accounts while living in Nepal, and also they are not in a position to register for births, for marriages and death even. And to sort of expand a little bit more on this, um, the unemployment rate of Tibetan refugees in Nepal is the fastest, as many Tibetans in their 20s and 30s call it, because most of them are not able to find decent jobs in Nepal. Many young educated Tibetans have to find ways to survive in working in small restaurants and cafes and carpet factories run by Tibetans but owned by Nepalese, because when you are undocumented, when you do not have a citizen of that country, you cannot legally register your business or even own a company, right? So that's when, most of the Tibetan businesses, they are being owned under the name of Chinese, under the name of Nepalese citizen, and then, but being run by Tibetans. And many of the young Tibetans, since the Nepalese government stopped issuing these refugee cards in 1995, I think the younger generation in Nepal is bearing most of the brunt because they are undocumented and obviously not having access to good jobs and stable jobs, right? And when we were there, we had the opportunity to speak to a group of young Tibetans there, and we came to know that even if they have a college degree, they're not able to find jobs, and there was this young man who was able to graduate from a medical college, and but he was refused a license to practice there in Nepal, and that eventually led him to go somewhere else to work in this field. And that was pretty common for other Tibetan professions as well as before, including the nurses, Tibetans who have done nursing courses and have professional certificates, but still cannot find a job related to their profession. There were 4 to 5 Tibetan women who had complete authentic, genuine nursing certificates, but then since they couldn't get a job, they're now working as beauticians in parlors in Tibetan refugee settlements there. So this was the kind of a situation that young people who have educational qualifications not able to find jobs, and obviously these important Tibetan anniversaries are being closely monitored by the Nepalese government, such as the Dalai Lama's birthday and the Tibetan National Uprising Day, and the Tibetan Democracy Day. All of these are, heavily monitored whenever there is such commemoration or anniversary happening. The Nepalese government would make sure to send, heavy Nepalese police into those Tibetan settlements and deploy them to sort of avoid making that ceremony taking place. And in Nepal today, to simply show yourself as a Tibetan, to showing your Tibetanness by wearing a traditional Tibetan dress can, potentially, put you in danger, because that would essentially make you look different in Nepal, and also, you can be subjected to arbitrary detention or preemptive detention, as they call it. So there were these and these sort of heavy monitoring and surveillance of these Tibetan anniversaries and celebrations are getting more sort of difficult to organize in recent years. There's always this, even though I'm not saying the Nepalese government is not allowing Tibetans to observe these anniversaries. They have been allowed, but in a way that it stays only within the settlement and not outside. And these ceremonies have been reduced to like only 1 hour ceremony, where Tibetans have been made to like wrap up this Dalai Lama birthday celebrations in like an hour. They are made to finish up early and then close everything up. So these anniversaries cannot be observed in that sort of open space. And obviously the Tibetan National Uprising, Tibetan National Uprising Day, where Tibetans all over the world actually observes on 10 March, but in Nepal, I mean, you cannot really carry out peaceful assembly in Nepal. I think the last peaceful demonstration that Tibetans in Nepal carried out was in 2000, in around 2008, and after that, the climate has become really difficult to, to organize such events like this. So, and of course, the Tibetan national flag, the display of Tibetan national flag is banned, and the local police can apprehend or arrest anyone seen bearing a Tibetan flag. There have been instances in the past that not Tibetans, non-Tibetans, who have been seen wearing T-shirts with Tibetan national flags, being detained, thinking that they are Tibetan and they are a troublemaker. So just simply, donning a Tibetan, donning a shirt that has a Tibetan national flag can land you in trouble in Nepal in today's scenario. And also, when we were there in Nepal, speaking to these members of the community, trying to understand more on the human rights situation there, it was quite evident that the community around the main Kathmandu area, where the Bauda Stupa is located, that's where a lot of Tibetans run their business, work in their businesses and can be seen, walking around. But that space is so heavily sort of invested with, I would say CCP-led surveillance and espionage activities, because you can obviously get a sense that you cannot speak freely and talk to anyone on these political issues in that kind of space, because you don't know who is working for who, right? And there was a sense that there was a sense that you cannot really obviously trust the other person you're speaking to. So that obviously makes you censor yourself before speaking out. And Tibetans, in Nepal, they told us that this area is so infested with Chinese spies, so it's so difficult to, first of all, speak and then, speak on Tibetan political issues. And they obviously, the Chinese surveillance obviously, monitor the activities of the Tibetan community there. And you cannot really make out who's who because, there are these officials who can be seen in civilian clothing and not in official clothing. So it's really difficult for you to identify, and who's who. And there were also a lot of Tibetans who are, working to report to the Chinese government. So I'm not saying all the Nepalese authorities, local authorities are working in collaboratively with the Chinese authorities, but there are also Tibetans who, who have been working with the Nepalese authorities there. And the space, obviously the physical space is heavy, since it's heavily monitored, it's really difficult to speak. But then online also, Facebook, Instagram, if you talk anything political or related to Tibetan independence, it can potentially, put you in danger. Because one of the instances that we came to know was in a very remote Tibetan settlement in Nepal, where, it was during the COVID lockdown. And someone, a very young Tibetan, he posted something, posted a picture that was basically criticizing the Chinese government for the spread of the coronavirus. And that photo he posted on his Facebook. And moments after he posted on Facebook, the local police showed up at his door, and the settlement officer there had to basically, help him flee the settlement, not just the settlement, but also to the India border to, make him not arrest, right? Arrest by the Nepalese authorities. So that's, I think this reflects how the online space is also heavily monitored by the authorities there, and you cannot really speak against the Chinese government. So, even the name Tibetan, we cannot really freely use. So for instance, I work for Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy, and India, even though we are all stateless, but we can still, use Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy as an organization. But in Nepal, Tibetan organizations, they cannot register their organizations with the name Tibetan. So there were organizations who had to change their name to, using Himalayan Human Rights Center, just so that they, cannot, because they cannot use the word Tibetan essentially. So yeah, organizations has a limit number of how much Tibetans can be, enrolled in these organizations. It's very limited in terms of, like, I think there were around, one organization can have not more than 4 to 5 Tibetans working in this organization, and it has to have, the Nepalese people working in there as well. So obviously the right to, and then of course, the right to freedom of movement is obviously so difficult when you do not have a refugee card or proper documentation. It's really difficult for Tibetans to not just travel from India to Nepal, but also from Nepal to international countries outside, so for stateless people like us, we have to get, whenever we plan to travel outside, we have to get an exit permit from the local government and a return visa. But the Nepalese government in Nepal has this huge reluctance to issue exit permits to Tibetans who want to travel internationally. And in 2007, the Nepal government, I think they blocked almost 5,000 Tibetan refugees who were supposed to be, relocated to the United States at the time. But then the Tibetan refugees there were refused the exit permit, and instead of them, the Nepalese government resettled, I think, some Bhutanese refugees of Nepali origin to resettle in the United States and Canada. So the situation is that today Tibetans in Nepal cannot fully live there as humans with dignity, but then the Nepalese government won't also allow them to leave Nepal as well. So that's the kind of situation that we've been dealing with, you know. And obviously, and when we were speaking to the Nepalese human rights lawyers who was working in these NGOs, and also speaking of NGO, you know, there are about, I think, more than 40,000 Tibetan, not Tibetan, just NGOs, non-government organizations working on various issues in Nepal, but you know, the support for Tibetan community in general is very minimal. There are only 4 to 5 NGOs who works, you know, and support on these Tibetan issues in general there. So the support from the civil society group there is also very, very, very limited. And speaking of media as well, since it's heavily, you know, since they cannot independently write and publish articles on Tibet or the Dalai Lama, you know, not many information related to Tibetan human rights situation gets, you know, covered by these Nepalese outlets. So when there's not much of coverage coming from Nepal itself, it's very difficult for the international news media to pick up the human rights situation that they've been dealing with so far. You know. So in terms of media and civil society, there's really minimal coverage on the Tibetan issues. So that's why, you know, we felt the need to highlight their human rights, the worsening of their human rights to the international community in hopes that, you know, we're able to pressure the Nepalese government to at least improve the situation of Tibetans living there, and as well as to actually honor the agreement that they have signed with the UNSCR in 1989. And also we wanted sort of more governments, international government, democratic governments to step in and, you know, pressure Nepal to improve the situation there. Because as I mentioned, as I was talking to Domala earlier, you know, there's not much attention being paid to the Tibetan human rights situation of, you know, those living in Nepal. Because the last report, a research report that was published on this situation was by the International Watchdog Human Rights Watch, and that was in 2014. And it's been almost a decade now, and there's no single report, you know, dedicated to the human rights situation of Tibetans living in Nepal. So that's when we felt the need to, as a human rights organization, to first of all, you know, document these issues, and then, you know, advocate for this issue. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dawala, for the fact that you have visited you have visited Nepal and conducted research and then able to provide the evidence-based reports. Is the main reason why we really wanted to have you and share the, you know, the evidence-based reports, you know. So yeah, so thank you for highlighting so many issues, how the Chinese government is influencing and not just the Tibetans, you know, political situation, right, to participate, you know, and in the activity, political related activities, but also at the individual level, you know, being a stateless, you know, covering all this issue within short period of time, right? Thank you so much. And now, may I invite Professor Pan to share your remarks, and if you have any question, you can also start. So firstly, you, based on your experience, and then today talks. So can you share your remarks and your thoughts?
Okay, thanks, Doma, for having me here. Okay, it is my privilege to have the opportunity to participate in this discussion. I have learned a lot from the talk of Mr. Vijay and Dawara. So I want to share some of my experience by as a Taiwanese visiting in Nepal in like a year. I remember it's like my first visit in Nepal is year 2012, around 12. Then as a Taiwanese tourist, when I get into Nepal, because the One China policy, we are not like the tourists from other country just apply for visa and then get in. We need to stand another line and then ask for a stay order. Now it's called a stay permission. So that is my first impression that, okay, Nepal has a very strict One China policy, because Taiwanese goes to all over the country. I don't think we get this kind of treatment in any other country. So this is my first impression as a Taiwanese being in Nepal. It is quite a special experience. Then I know this kind of regulation is still, it will not change, and even more strictly regulated. And so when I visit Nepal, I also went to Bauda, and I also visit Pokhara, and also, of course, in Kathmandu. So during my visit, I can see so many things has already made in China, in Bauda, in Pokhara, in everywhere in Nepal. And also, I also got the opportunity to participate the birthday of His Holiness Dalai Lama. And so the Tibetan with me, they cannot wear their own chuba. They just show me they have bring their own chuba. Then they have to drive by their own car. They cannot take bus. So then they just drive their cars, and then they just goes to the place where I celebrate the Dalai Lama's birthday. Then they just put on their chuba. Then I remember that time, they also have another ceremony. Then by that time, I think police came in to make arrestment. So those things, you talk about the Tibetan refugees situation. I have the first-hand experience, and I also witnessed this kind of situation. And this kind of things I will never forget, because I think this is a very serious human rights issue, human rights situation. Okay. And so then I will come back to today's talk from the Taiwan, because this talk is held in National Yangming Jiaotong University in Taiwan. So I want to say South Asia is a remote area from Taiwan, more academically than geographically. While Tibet has a historical connection with Taiwan due to the KMT's regime's ideology, Taiwan and India have built up a close economic cooperation recently, but Nepal is the least country to be noticed compared with Tibet and India in Taiwan. So for Taiwan, this kind of discussion, I don't think we have this kind of discussion before, but I'm very glad that Doma can make it this time, because Taiwan, although okay, but actually Taiwan does have something in common with Tibet and Nepal. The common factor, of course, is China. And China's ambition is to become the world leader. So what has happened in Tibet and Nepal demonstrate how China used its military and economic power to achieve this goal. Of course, China's military threat to Taiwan is just day by day increasing. Okay. So today's talk unveils China's impact on Nepal through so-called means of soft power and sharp power. China does not only control Tibet, but also use the side of Nepal to control Tibetan refugees and secure its control on Tibet. So not only economically, but also culturally, and most importantly, in religion. So therefore, it is not only a change of power structure, geopolitically, but also a human rights issue. So I noticed that the border between Nepal and China has changed enormously. So it is not only to set up the concrete buildings, but most importantly, the landscape to border lives, culture, and the social relationships has changed. I think it's forever. So the consequence is the outmove of the younger generation, and eventually the thousands of years of the cultures will be diminished by the new border situation. So however, the Nepali people welcome China's so-called help, even though they know the reality is China's exercise control over the country. So I'm quite curious. My question is, so what are the intellectuals or the NGOs' role in facing the China and the Nepal, the new friendship in Nepal? So is there any kind of different view compared to the government or the so-called people? Because I think now the Nepali government is too weak to resist, and the people is too poor to resist. So is there any other different voices within Nepal? How about the middle class or the intellectuals view this kind of relationship between Nepal and China? So this is kind of things I would like to know more. And then about the Tibetan refugees situation, is even more difficult than before. From my view, they were just a refugee before, but now it's the hostage in Nepal. It's the hostage for a Nepali government to negotiate with China. I think it's kind of a weak nation's strategy to deal with the strong power, and Tibetans serve the role for this weak nation. So given this kind of imbalance of power between these two countries, I don't know whether the CTA can do anything, or is there anything it's doing. So that maybe the information I also like to learn. And also, how do people to deal with this kind of situation, if there is any? And then my last question is, what else we can do for this kind of situation? Okay, so this is my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pan, for sharing your experience and also throwing some questions to bring a new perspective about, how about, middle class? How about the intellectual community? What is their opinion, right? And also regarding the Tibetans, what city is doing for Tibetans refugee in India to bring awareness or a situation there, right? So I think it's so both of our speakers can, I think, answer this, and it's very different perspective. So first, can I invite Professor Vijay?
Yes.
Yeah, about the questions Professor Pan just raised about the different perspective from the intellectual community or middle class about the China. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Pan, for questions. I'm sorry to hear about your pain when you arrived in the international airport of Nepal. I'm sorry to hear it. Not you, but many of the person I know I met here as a Taiwanese tourist or anybody, and some of the people who are working in Nepal and helping as a philanthropist, helping the poor people in working in some monastery in Nepal, to whom I know, I met, and they shared same thing as what you said. But as I'm not a government person anymore, and I can only say that being a Nepali, I'm really sorry to hear about it. The second thing that coming to the Taiwan issues, Taiwan and Nepal, actually in August 22, when Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, and it is a big, that protest by the Chinese government, and everywhere the Chinese government tried to influence our government to make a statement, which Nepal government, then government refused. Even the Chinese invited our foreign minister in China, and Wang Yi visit, talked to him and asked for a statement from China. Our government, our foreign ministry made a small statement which says that Nepal is constantly watching the situation in Taiwan Straits. We never said anything. But recent visit of our Prime Minister, which is said that repeatedly it is said that the Taiwan is an integral part of China, and we will support China in that course. I have seen it, our Prime Minister said, and it is written in the joint communique also. But look, this one China policy or one China principles is a guiding things during the Nepal-China relationship. And this is the one of the very strict point. And Nepal is a very small country, situated between the two giants' power. So we have been tremendous pressure from north on this Tibetan refugee or Taiwan issues. So that's why for your things that about the intellectuals, civil society, and even I found some media people, they are positive towards the issue raised to the issues of the Tibetan refugees. They are facing their hardship. They are followed by intelligentsia, police, and they were not allowed to perform their religious functions openly. So but the things are that since last 60, 70 years, almost 60 years, more than 60, 64 years, the Nepal has provided a huge, large number of, although at the time Nepal was not capable and still not capable to welcome refugee in the country. But Nepal provides Tibetan refugee space besides protest from China. At the time also it was a huge pressure by the Chinese government, but Nepal agreed to keep some refugee in different places. They provided land to live in, the different parts of Nepal, even in the northern border and even in the Pokhara, Kathmandu, in different places of Kathmandu. As I remember, 3 places in Jaulakhel, and then it's the Swambhu and Bodha. There are 3 places. And other parts of Nepal, even some of the people living in the remote area, and they were given shelter in Nepal. But the question is that from day one, 64 years of advocacy, 65 years of advocacy, this issue has not actually reached to the common people of Nepal. What I found that when I was started working some years back, I found that why our political leaders are not aware, even those who are not close to China, why our civil society is not aware, why our media people are not aware. So where these international organizations are working. So this is very important. But largely if you talk to them, when I talk to the people of same origin in Nepal, they are very sympathetic towards them. And many of the Tibetan refugees now became the citizen of Nepal, as many of them became a citizen. Many runs hotels and everything. But this issue is in the heart of the different people. but nobody tried to put in the paper. There was no funding for such activities in Nepal. I couldn't find it. When I was recently in Tenzin, I seen Tenzin there. So we are discussing about the Nepal's Tibet policy. I was looking at the different websites and talking with the different people, and I couldn't find, there are policies, but I couldn't find in a one book or one paper. I mean that in a aggregated way. There are a lot of changes has been done during the different phases of the time. Recent time, and from 1995, in 2005, there are changes. And again, after 2008, we have a lot of changes there. In 2015 onward, there is another policy changes. But I couldn't find in one place. There is no intellectual debate done in the past. Just recently, we have some discussion we have initiated, not in a large scale, but in a one way or another way, we are trying to do it. So that's why investment in these areas, research, and then question of human rights organization. There is no single human rights organization who advocates about the rights of Tibetan refugees in Nepal. So these are the things which could have been done earlier, but we yet not. So it need to create some, not I am telling the Tibetan people to speak about the Tibetan, but the other Nepalese, other civil society organization to speak about their rights. The political leaders, so that they can raise the issue in parliament. I mean, so this is the most important thing. And your question about the intellectual, yes, there are many, I found many intellectuals, even the people of the Buddhist intellectuals. I found several intellectuals in university and colleges. They are not aware of all these things, actually. Almost media is controlled by them. So that's why media is badly influenced by the Chinese government, Chinese embassy activities. So it needs to create the alternative things. You have to create some organization, invest in research, bring out all this pain, what Tenzin Dawa shared us, what their organization earlier published a paper, to bring on the notice of the people. That is very important. Not only Washington or I mean that the London or Dharamsala. It needs to create some sorts of a stake in Kathmandu, in different parts of Nepal. Somebody has to initiate discussion on these issues. So there is a need of such activities. But I found that there is a I mean opportunity still. And coming to Taiwan, Nepal things, I told your officials in Delhi that, look, you could have understand Nepal's situation. In that case, what I suggested them to start with the business, establish business council, invest in Nepal. You are allowed to invest in Nepal. Invest in educational institutions, provide a scholarship to the Nepalese students, so that they can understand about the very few people know about Taiwan. And there is a need of to doing, I mean, where is the opportunity? Okay, politically not opportunity, government to government not opportunity, but the intellectual there is opportunity. University there is an opportunity. A student and business, the most important thing that once you involve in economic activities of any countries, then you have increased your space in the countries. Think about India. What about 40 years back in India, Taiwan relations? What was that? But now you have a large investment from Taiwan, and even India has an office at the level of ambassador. And same with the Taiwan has an office in Delhi in the name of cultural or whatever that things. But everybody knows this is both are diplomatic missions. And India sent always the senior diplomat to the Taipei. So if you see in the background, 40, 50 years back, there was not. But you have to start economic and cultural cooperation, social cooperation. In that way, what I found that yes, it is, I know the hardship of the Tibetan refugee in Nepal. They have been followed. The Chinese embassy spies are working on it. Many of the Chinese embassy try to buy by the even Tibetan refugee became the intelligence for the Chinese embassy. There are a lot, and through that way they are playing many games in Kathmandu and different parts of the within the Tibetan refugee. So it needs that to educate them, to organize them, and to interact with the other community also. Keep relations with the other civil society organization. So this is the most important thing. That much I can say you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vijay, for for giving a lot of yes. It's not just political, but economic is the gateway to further the relation, right? And yeah, and Dawala, would you like to respond on CTA?
I just quickly comment very briefly on, add on what Professor Vijay just mentioned. So from a research there, speaking to the people there, I think the support and the sympathy from the Nepalese people in general in Nepal is not bad. People are sympathetic of the Tibetan issue or the kind of human rights issues that they're going through. But when everything comes to stop at the institution, at the political level, people are able to talk on these issues in the community. But when there is this, when the issue reaches at the government level or at the institution level, things get stopped there, because obviously China is very sensitive to the kind of Tibetan issues that are being talked about in Nepal in general, right? So I remember this incident when some scholars studying at a Nepal university, who decided to work on a paper that essentially talked about I think something related to Tibet. But then I think the professor at the university urged him not to work on this paper because that would that might have serious repercussions if this paper would be done. So again, there's this urge for there's this request from the top to stop these informations from getting disseminated, not just at not just in the academic sphere, but also again in the media as well. Media again is even though reporters want to report on this issue, but then again, from the editors, from the request of the editors, and also from the government, it gets declined. So yeah, so I think people in general do not have issue with Tibetans living there and are quite sympathetic to that. But again, and then the other thing about can CTA do anything about this issue? This is a very debated topic in the Tibetan community in Nepal. Actually, Tibetan refugees living in the settlements there is quite frustrated with how the CTA is, handling the issue of Tibetan refugees in Nepal, because they are saying that there's no leadership coming from the CTA to help Tibetan refugees there. I mean, obviously there are Tibetan settlements, Tibetan schools there, but everything is done in terms of, I mean, the people are taken care of in the settlement only, but not from the larger perspective. So they want CTA to, show leadership on this issue and talk about this more openly. And as we speak today, there's this Tibetan Parliament session going on, and days before, there was again this contention on this issue that some parliament members basically mentioning our report and saying that, there's this report that came out on the Tibetan issues in Nepal, and is the Tibetan government, aware of this, or do you want to do something on this? And then again, the other parliamentary or the minister, I think it was the minister, or one of the ministers in the government that essentially said that, these things are better not talked about openly, because again, I understand where they're coming from. They care about what might happen if we speak openly on this issue to the Tibetans living in Nepal, right? The Nepalese government might do anything, because many of them are still stateless, and they're basically in the hands of the Chinese government, so to say. So there's again this debate on whether to talk on this issue or not to talk on this issue. Again, this is a huge issue for the Tibetan community in general. And again, CTA, again, the Tibetans in Nepal, they want CTA to be more proactive on this issue and speak more on this issue. Yeah.
Thank you, Dawala. We have Tamdu. Do you have any question? Tamdu for.
Not any question in particular, but I would be interested of hearing like Dawalas and their organization. They came out with a very interesting report. I think she mentioned bits and parts of it during her talk, but what were the real challenges that you faced? Like some of it were mentioned, but I mean, you guys came out with your annual report, which I congratulate. So if you could throw much light on it, it would help us and many other different organizations like Ambassador Vijay Sir's organization to do further research on Nepal, which I believe and which all of us here believe much needed.
You mean challenges when we were working in the report in Nepal, or like challenges in general? Yeah.
Actually, where is that? Professor Vijay, he has to leave in few minutes.
Okay.
Can I ask him a question? And then on also to you. So Vijay, sir, are you still there? 1 second. Vijay, sir, I think he has stopped. Okay, Dawala, you can continue. Sorry for that.
Yes,
Oops, back.
yes.
Okay, sir. Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask a few questions before, since you, the time, due to the time restraints, you have to go. My question is, one is related to the digital cooperation between the Chinese government and the Nepal government, especially in terms of digital cooperations and then digital surveillance. So if you could share your thoughts on this particular topic. And then also the questions, I think, as far as Tibetans in Nepal are concerned, it's not just the Tibetan refugee who are doing, like let's say the political activities in Nepal, but it's also the Tibetan who are at the border are also considered as the threat, right? So for Chinese government, now we can see like why it's, because when we read the paper, people mainly only talk about the political activities of Tibetans, So it's not just the political activity, even people living at the border are also considered as threats. So is it, and then another question is from your talk today, what I understand is, on the one hand, there is a BRI project that, as you mentioned, many are not still yet to implement, the government. And then there are another thing like investment done in like establishing the universities, Buddhist universities. So it seems like on the one hand, China, there is a growing interference or the influence, but on the other hand, there are a big challenges still there. So it's still, many are, if we read the newspaper, what we see is like, oh, now Nepal is completely, China has already bought the Nepal. This kind of perception is very prevalent, right? But from your topic, I can see that the resistance that are still strong. So there's a gaps in this understanding between, the others and the people, local people, someone who
Yes.
has a scholar like you. So yes, can you
Okay, thank you, thank you. So it's a look about the digital cooperation. We have a last year signed a digital payment system with the Chinese government. So our central bank has signed a contract and it is yet not materialized, but it is going to materialize very soon. The digital payment system. About the digital surveillance. Look, there are a lot of things due to this one because that the Nepal government has bought several software from Chinese company like Huawei and ZTE. They are major supplier of our telecom sectors of hardware and software both. So that is why there is a surveillance. That is why about the this digital other things that the Nepal, other countries like India, USA, and other European countries has protested this, and that's why 5G plan yet not implemented. Although Nepal telecom company has agreed to buy the from Huawei, but due to some protest from other countries, Nepal yet not implemented 5G. About uh, about the issues of human rights. I told you earlier that the issues of the not only Tibetan refugees, but the Tibetan origin people in Nepal also are not being raised in Nepalese political circle. And there are several Sherpa organizations, there are several political wing of the different political parties of this Sherpa people in Nepal, but they never raised this issue. That is why I told you that there is a need of such organization to create here. I mean the human rights organization who can speak I'm not talking about the refugee only, but the people living in the border. That's a very important thing. And another one has to do some study about the migration of the people from northern border to the central region of Nepal, the mid-hill of Nepal. And due to I mean that the almost the relations between the northern border to Tibet has been closed, so the people are facing very hardship, economic hardship, social and cultural relation cut off, but economic hardship made the people to go to the other, I mean the comfortable places. So it's a huge migration is being at the moment from northern border, the Nepalese northern border people, inhabitants coming to the Kathmandu, Pokhara and different parts of Nepal. So these are the issues somebody has to speak on the basis of research, on the basis of some findings. You must have some paper first. Then you can talk to the international community. You talk to the government. You ask your parliamentarian to speak about all these things. That is why I said that there is a need of that one. So, and on the look, I said that look, China's engagement in Nepal is huge. And because of the Chinese, Nepal's Communist Party relations, and there are other things also. And China has a huge money. They bought the political leaders. They fund political leaders during the time of election. They bribe our bureaucrats. They bribe our security personnel. So it's a big challenge here. So, and that's why I don't say that somebody has started today and it makes a difference. But if somebody has started, then only it is started making difference. And then, but there are other things like on BRI. BRI, China has a bad time in Nepal. Nepal never has taken commercial loan, number one. Number two, if we take 100% loan from any countries, we will not allow foreign countries to make tender and manage the project. That is in our legal instrument. So then what you have to do then? Then you have to come some parts of, in the loan you have to come some parts, 10%, 20% as a grants. Then only it is possible. China at the moment is not ready to fund grants in BRI project, because this is not the case of Nepal only. This is the case of other South Asian and other countries too. Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asian countries, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Nepal, and even the Maldives. If you give, China gives soft loan and grants to Nepal, why not Sri Lanka? Why not Bangladesh? So that's why there is a, I don't know, this is the communist government, they may, but if they do such things without the consent of the major opposition parties, I don't think that project will be going to be implemented, because the opposition, even just day before yesterday, former finance minister raised this issue very strongly in parliament. So that's why it's very hard for Chinese and Nepalese, present Nepalese government to sign anything on commercial loan. So this is a very much, the difficult thing. But you know one thing, that last 6-7 years, China has been badly criticized in Nepal also, because they didn't complete any project on time. They had not started several projects they promised. In some of the projects, so they have to hand over the project in 2023. It is only 10% or 12% they completed. Chinese contractors are very badly. And Nepal government last year and I think 22, 23, several Chinese companies are blacklisted in Nepal. Many of the contracts are cancelled. But still they get the project, because that they whenever there is a tender, the lowest bidder is the Chinese company, and that's why they get the tender. So this is the way. And the end of the project, they get more money than the tender amount, because the one way or another way they bribe the technical officer, bureaucracy, and that's why. But now they are facing the troubles also. So that's why we have done some research on infrastructure. Tenzin Damdul know about that all research. I have handed over all the research to the FNBA, that we have done some research where the Chinese company corruption, where the Chinese funding, even in the Pokhara airport and other projects also. So that's why people now started talking about the China. Earlier it was not. So that there is an opportunity, I can tell you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dawala? And Dawala, also adding to the Tamdu questions, I'm like, how about the US playing role in the, what kind of reactions, or is there any response from the US about the Tibetans situations in Nepal? Because I do remember when the current coordinator of the US representative to Tibet visited Nepal and also visited the Tibetan community there, right? So yeah, can you, if you have any impressions about the visit and US reactions? And also, yeah, I'm particularly more interested in Tamtu mentions about the challenges that you face as a researcher, conducting research there.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for the questions. So the research that we conducted was done in collaboration with a South Korea-based NGO. They're called the Asian Dignity Initiative. So together with them, they've been able to come out with this report. And again, the report that we put out is, I won't say it's perfect, in a sense that we wanted more sort of perspective to be documented in this report. Because if you go through the report, you won't see that much of coverage in terms of how the Nepalese authorities there themselves think on the Tibetan issue, because we did not have the opportunity to speak to in Nepal authorities, government authorities, there. And also, since UNHCR has a huge role to play in terms of improving the situation of Tibetans living there, we did reach out to the head of the UNHCR there, based in Nepal, but then they were reluctant to speak with us, and they basically declined to talk to us. So that's how it even came about, the perspective. And the third thing again is that since we are Tibetans, we do not speak the Nepalese language. There was this language barrier for us to even get into more detail into the kind of coverage that has been done in these local languages newspapers, right? So that took a lot of time, and obviously some legal papers we were was in Nepalese language, and that the language was a huge barrier for us to get more in depth on this issue, and so quite many challenges there. And the last thing I would say, we were not able to travel to the remote Tibetan settlements in Nepal, because the ones that we were able to travel were largely based in Kathmandu and in Pokhara area. But there are quite many Tibetan settlements in the border areas where we wanted to go, but then because of time constraints, and other commitments that we had back in the office, so we weren't able to travel there. So that was a huge miss that I still think about, that we should have gone there and spoken to these people living there, because I believe they have a huge, completely different perspective, maybe, because we've been seeing in these newspapers of this Chinese government setting up new monasteries in these border areas. So there's area that we wanted to understand, and cover, but that didn't happen, sadly. But we'll make sure, in future we can take on this issue. And other than that, the one that Domala asked about the support from the US, I think support from the US is US is the only government who is, who wants to act to improve the Tibetan living there, and that was clearly that was quite evident when Uzra Zayas, the Secretary of State, right? She visited Nepal in 2000, I think 1 or 2 years ago, and many Tibetans living there told us that that was the only positive thing that they saw in front of their eyes in so many years. And I think that her visit to Nepal was a spark of hope for the Tibetans there, that at least one government is cares about this issue and wants to help us. So I think at the moment in the international community, I think only the US government is out there and openly talking on the issues that the Tibetans living in Nepal face. Because I'm not saying there's no other governments who do not support Tibetans living in Nepal, but US is the one that is more open. Yeah.
Okay, one second, let me check if we have.
Sorry, Dolma, I have to go for.
Yeah, yes, sir, yes, sir. So I think we don't have any more questions, so yeah, I think.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, meeting everyone.
Thank you.
Professor Plan, Dolma, Tenzin, and other. It's nice to see you all and meeting you all. Thank you very much.
So we have our Professor Joyce we
Yes,
have our
thank you.
center.
Yeah.
Actually,
I have a quick question, but I don't know whether Vijay has time for that. Following up Doma's comment about this digital surveillance, we noticed that Nepal also signed another Belt Road Initiative with China this year, and that will enhance this digital connectivity. So we also learned that China has practiced many long-arm jurisdictions around the world, trying to maybe arrest dissidents.
Just to tell you one thing, that we have digital connectivity not under the BRI project. And we have
Wow.
signed BRI MOU in 2017 and no project at materialized. But we have another arrangement where the Chinese government helping our security agencies, largely armed paramilitary forces and one civil police. There they have supplied some equipment, some software, and then we have a digital payment system with the Central Bank of Nepal, with the Chinese government bank. But yes, I know that about that, the how they theft the data, and that's why the 5G is yet not materialized in Nepal. That's the point. So I'm sorry, Professor. I'm sorry. I have another meeting in 5 minutes. So thank you
Okay.
very much for
Thank
everyone.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Bye.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
And Dawala and Professor Pan, thank you for taking time to take part in the today discussions. I think in Taiwan we hardly have any discussions about Nepal and China, and then with today discussions, there's so many details, particularly about Nepal-China relations, and then the Tibetans, its impact on Tibetans, and also about the Tibetan situation in Nepal. So we have, so now we have built up this, discussions. So we hope to continue further. And yes, thank you all for your time and your inputs. And yeah, and happy weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you for
Thank you so
organizing.
much.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.